The night was heavy with silence when the scream sliced through the air, a shriek so raw it echoed in Emily's chest. She froze, eyes wide, unsure if it was real or just a nightmare born from the darkness. The scream seemed to vibrate in the walls, reverberating off the old wood, making the air feel dense and alive. Fear seeped in, creeping through the cracks of her mind. Her heart pounded in her chest, and as she gathered the courage to move, a strange sensation washed over her, an overwhelming feeling that someone was watching. With trembling hands, she reached for the light switch, hoping the dark would recede, but as the light flickered, the world remained unchanged. The room felt colder now, as if the scream had left an imprint. She tried to shake it off, but the chill lingered, settling into her bones. Something was not right, but she couldn't tell what. Emily's mind raced as she stood frozen, still grappling with the sharp echo of that scream. She tried to convince herself it was just the house settling, or perhaps a figment of her imagination, but the sensation of eyes watching her wouldn't go away. Every creak of the floor, every whisper of the wind seemed to feed the unease creeping through her bones. She glanced at the clock. 2:15 a.m. The hour seemed to mock her, as if the night itself was stretching into an endless abyss. The walls felt like they were closing in on her, and despite the warmth of the room, she felt the chill of something unnatural hovering just beyond her perception. Thought of the door opening on its own, the darkness outside her room, each moment seemed laden with the threat of something lurking in the shadows. But what? She didn't know. Whatever it was, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change forever, that the terror had only just begun. The quiet was deafening now. Emily's thoughts spiraled, drowning her in uncertainty. The house was old, and it had its quirks, creaks, groans, unexplained drafts. But this was different. This felt like someone was present. The very air in the room was thick with anticipation, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the bed, nails digging into the fabric of the blanket. Every time she thought she could relax, the silence would break with the faintest sound, a whisper of movement just beyond the door. The clock ticked louder in her mind. It seemed to count down to something inevitable. She glanced at the door once more, unable to tear her eyes away, her heart racing faster with each passing second. Was it the house? Was it her imagination? Or was it something else, something darker, waiting patiently in the dark corners of the world? The dread settled deeper within her, and she knew she couldn't ignore it any longer. She had to find out what was hiding in the shadows. The door creaked. Emily's breath hitched in her throat, her body frozen as if the very air around her had thickened, making it hard to breathe. The faintest sliver of light from the hallway seeped through the gap under the door, stretching out across the dark floor. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her pulse race. Was it just the wind? The house settling? Or was something, or someone, on the other side? Her heart hammered in her chest, her eyes fixed on the door. It wasn't just the scream anymore, it was the feeling that something was about to break through the silence. The darkness beyond seemed to beckon, the unknown pulling at her with an almost physical force. She couldn't sit still any longer. Slowly she stood up from the bed, her feet cold against the floor. Each step felt heavier as she approached the door, her body trembling with fear. She had to know what was out there, even if she wasn't sure she wanted to. Emily's hand hovered over the doorknob, fingers trembling, as the world outside seemed to hold its breath. The silence was deafening now, the only sound the erratic ticking of the clock on the nightstand. Her heart raced, pounding in her ears as if urging her to move, to open the door and face whatever lay beyond. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady her breath, but the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. Her skin prickled, and she could almost feel the presence of something, or someone, on the other side. What was it? The same sensation that had haunted her since the scream, the one that clung to the very air of the room. She couldn't stay trapped in this room any longer, but the thought of stepping into the hallway, into the unknown terrified her. Yet she knew that the fear would only grow if she stayed here. She had to face it. With one final shaky breath, Emily twisted the doorknob and opened the door. The darkness outside swallowed her whole. Emily sat in the living room, her eyes glued to the window as the rain poured outside. The scream from the night before still echoed in her mind, and now, every rustle of the wind, every flicker of light, made her jump. She had to convince herself it was just stress, that she was imagining things. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. It wasn't just the house. It was something more. The stillness of the night seemed unnatural. Emily stood up, pacing, her mind racing as she tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in her gut. The more she tried to shake it off, the stronger it became. She had to know what was happening. The feeling of being watched hadn't left her since that scream, and every step she took seemed to echo back at her, mocking her anxiety. Emily's attempt to focus on a book failed. The words blurred before her eyes, as the noises around her grew louder. A whisper echoed from the shadows, too faint to make out, but undeniable. She quickly slammed the book shut, her breath quickening. She wasn't alone. The air felt thick, charged, as though it was bracing itself for something that hadn't yet arrived. It wasn't just the whispers, it was the growing sense of dread, the certainty that something unseen was moving just out of her line of sight. The walls seemed to close in around her, and she felt a surge of panic rise in her chest. It was no longer about hearing things, it was about the feeling that she was being hunted. With her nerves on edge, Emily grabbed her phone, hoping to find some comfort in a call. She dialed her friend Claire, but after a few rings, it went to voicemail. "Claire, I need help," she whispered into the phone, her voice shaking. "Something's wrong, I can feel it. Please call me back." She hung up, but the feeling of isolation was stronger than ever. The silence that followed felt suffocating. She stared at the phone in her hand, waiting for a call that never came. The shadows in the room shifted, and Emily's breath hitched as she heard something new, a soft tap, almost imperceptible, like a knock. But there was no one at the door. She slowly rose, her pulse quickening. Emily's heart raced as she slowly approached the door. The tapping had stopped, but now there was a distinct creak from above, the sound of something heavy shifting in the attic. Every hair on the back of her neck stood on end. The dark house seemed to breathe, its old wooden beams groaning in protest. She pressed her ear against the door, straining to listen, but all she could hear was the pounding of her own heartbeat. Was it just her imagination? Or was something truly up there? Emily knew she had to check, but fear held her in place. She turned toward the stairs leading up to the attic, the air growing colder with every step she took. Emily stood at the foot of the attic stairs, her breath shallow and quick. The house was unnervingly still, but she could sense something hidden in the shadows, just beyond her reach. She turned the knob and slowly pushed the door open. The attic was bathed in darkness, save for the faintest sliver of moonlight peeking through a small window. Her hand shook as she reached for the light switch, but just as her fingers brushed it, a cold gust of air swept through the room. She froze, her pulse racing. Something was in the attic with her, but it was impossible to see. The room felt like it was closing in, and Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was not alone. The air in the attic was thick with dust, and Emily's breath came out in shallow gasps as she stood frozen. It was there again, the whisper, faint but clear. Her eyes scanned the dark corners of the attic, the shadows stretching long and haunting. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Suddenly, a chill swept across the room, and the temperature dropped. Emily's heart raced, and she instinctively stepped back. The whisper became louder, and with it came the distinct sound of footsteps behind her. She spun around, but there was nothing. The attic was empty, yet the presence of someone, was undeniable. Her pulse raced. She had to know. The whisper continued, now distinct, like a voice in the wind, but just close enough to make her heart race. "Emily," it called, and her blood ran cold. The voice was familiar, yet distorted. She turned around, but the attic remained empty. Emily's mind raced, questioning if it was all in her head. Could it be a memory? Or something else entirely? The air was suffocating, and she felt as if the walls were closing in on her. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice cracking. She took a cautious step forward, but every movement seemed to be met with a growing sense of dread. Suddenly, a figure materialized in the corner of the attic, its form hazy, as though it existed only half in this world. Emily gasped, unable to tear her eyes away from the apparition. "Who are you?" she whispered again, her voice barely audible. The figure moved closer, its features distorted but unmistakable. A face, pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes. It was a face she had seen before in her dreams. Emily's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a ghost, this was someone she had known long ago. I remember you," she stammered, the words falling from her lips as if they had been waiting to be said. The ghostly figure slowly reached out its hand, its movements deliberate and unnervingly slow. Emily recoiled, but her feet felt like they were glued to the floor. "You know me," the figure rasped, its voice a haunting echo. Emily's heart thudded in her chest, and her mind raced as fragments of memory flooded back. "No," she whispered. You can't be." But there was no denying the truth. The face, the voice, it all matched. This was the face of someone from her past. Someone she had tried to forget. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice trembling, filled with both fear and sorrow. As the figure's hand touched hers, a shock of cold shot through Emily's arm. Her vision blurred, and for a moment, everything around her dissolved into a swirling fog. Memories she had long buried resurfaced, faces, places, moments she wished to forget. She gasped for air, her heart racing in her chest. The figure's presence was overwhelming, suffocating. "What do you want from me?" Emily cried out, her voice breaking. The ghost's eyes seemed to soften, as if it wanted to communicate something. A fleeting moment of compassion flickered in its expression, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by an unbearable sadness. Emily stumbled backward as the realization hit her like a wave. The ghost in the attic wasn't just a random entity. It was a part of her past, something she had tried to bury. Her hands trembled as she ran them through her hair, trying to make sense of it all. "How is this possible?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. The walls around her felt as though they were closing in, their oppressive presence making the air feel thick. Her heart raced, and she struggled to breathe. Every sound, every shift in the air seemed to amplify her anxiety. She couldn't run anymore. The truth was inescapable. The attic, the house, it was all connected to her, to something she had done. The ghost's haunting presence was no accident, and the terror that had been following her was only the beginning. She had to face it, whatever it was. Emily couldn't escape the feeling that someone was watching her, even in the silence of the attic. She spun around, half expecting the ghost to appear again. But there was only the stillness, broken only by the sound of her rapid breathing. The past seemed to loom over her, and every creak of the house echoed her growing fear. "I never should come here," she murmured, guilt weighing down on her chest. The walls seemed to press closer, the very air turning cold with an ominous energy. Her mind raced through the past, each memory more vivid, more terrifying than the last. Was the ghost seeking revenge? Or was it trying to warn her about something far worse? The answers eluded her, and with every passing second, the house seemed more like a prison. Emily had crossed a line, and now there was no turning back. Suddenly, a sound broke the silence. A loud, guttural bang from above. Emily froze, her heart hammering in her chest. She knew what it meant. It wasn't just the house settling. Something, or someone, was up there. She tried to move, but her legs felt like they were made of stone, rooted to the floor by the fear that gripped her. The banging grew louder, more frantic, as if something was trying to escape. "No, no, no," she muttered under her breath, her mind spiraling. Her thoughts raced as she struggled to understand what was happening. The truth was closing in on her, but the answers she needed were out of reach. All she knew was that she had to go up there. She had to face whatever was waiting for her, no matter how terrifying it was. Shaking, Emily climbed the stairs toward the attic door, her mind racing. Every step felt like an eternity as the sound from above continued to pound in her ears. She knew that whatever she would find up there would answer questions she wasn't sure she wanted to know. The fear gnawed at her, but she couldn't stop. The door loomed ahead, dark and foreboding, and Emily's hand hovered over the handle. Her breath came in shallow bursts, and she swallowed hard. The house was silent now, the noise from above abruptly stopping. But that only made it worse. Whatever was in the attic, it had heard her coming. The confrontation was inevitable. As Emily opened the attic door, a cold gust of wind hit her face, and a strange familiar scent filled the air. Dust, and something else she couldn't place. She stepped inside, and the room felt like it had been frozen in time. Old boxes, forgotten relics of the past, lined the walls, covered in thick layers of dust. The dim light from the window barely illuminated the space. There, in the far corner, a figure stood, its back to her, motionless. Emily's heart skipped a beat. The figure turned slowly, revealing the face of someone she knew all too well. The past and present collided, and Emily realized, with a shiver down her spine, that she had never truly left her past behind. It had always been waiting for her. The figure before Emily was unmistakable, the face, twisted in anguish, staring at her. It was the face of someone she had loved. Someone she had lost years ago. How can this be? Emily whispered, her voice trembling. The figure slowly reached out, its hand cold and lifeless. You left me behind, it rasped, its voice hauntingly familiar. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Memories flooded back, each one more painful than the last. I'm sorry, she stammered, but the figure only stared, its eyes filled with a cold, unyielding rage. The atmosphere around them seemed to freeze, the silence deafening. There was no escape from the truth. The ghost was not just a memory. It was a consequence of her actions. Emily stepped back, her mind racing as she tried to understand what was happening. The ghost's presence felt like a weight on her chest, suffocating her. I didn't leave you, she whispered, but her words were hollow. The figure's eyes narrowed, and a bitter laugh escaped its lips. You abandoned me, it hissed, its voice full of anguish and anger. Emily's knees buckled slightly under the pressure of the guilt that crushed her. She had always tried to forget, but now it was clear she could never escape her past. The ghost's rage, its pain, it all stemmed from something she had done long ago. And now, the consequences were here, haunting her in the worst possible way. The ghost stepped closer, its hand now inches from Emily's face. You didn't even try to save me, it murmured, its voice soft but filled with venom. Emily's breath hitched as she reached up to touch the ghost's hand, but before she could, it jerked back. What do you want from me? Emily asked, desperation creeping into her voice. The ghost's eyes locked onto hers with a cold, unblinking stare. I want you to remember, it replied, its voice growing louder, more forceful. The room seemed to close in on Emily as memories, long buried, resurfaced with violent clarity. She had never truly escaped. The ghost was a reminder, a mirror to her deepest regret. The ghost's face twisted with sorrow and rage, and Emily felt the weight of its stare pierce through her. Why didn't you save me? It repeated, its voice a mournful wail that reverberated through the attic. Emily felt tears sting her eyes, but she couldn't look away. I was too scared, she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't know what to do. The ghost's form flickered, as if it was fighting to stay intact. It's too late now, it said softly, its voice full of bitter resignation. Emily's heart shattered, knowing that nothing she could say would ever bring back the past or undo the damage she had caused. The truth was inescapable, and the torment was only beginning. The ghost's form began to dissipate, the figure slowly vanishing into the shadows of the attic. Emily's heart raced, and she reached out, desperate to hold on to something. Anything. No, please, she whispered. But it was too late. The ghost was gone, leaving only a heavy silence behind. Emily collapsed to her knees, her emotions overwhelming her. She had hoped that facing the truth would bring her peace, but all it had done was open wounds that had never healed. The house, the ghost, it had all been a reminder of her failure, and now she had nothing left but the bitter taste of regret. She had never truly escaped, and she never would. Emily stood at the threshold of the dark hallway, the weight of the past bearing down on her. Every inch she moved forward felt like a battle, her heart racing in her chest. She could feel the eyes on her again, the invisible presence that had haunted her since that night. "It ends tonight," she whispered, her voice steady but filled with determination. She had come this far, and she wouldn't back down. The darkness ahead seemed endless, but Emily knew she had to face it. Whatever it was that had been tormenting her was not just a ghost, it was a part of her, and the time had come to confront it once and for all. With one final deep breath, she stepped into the abyss. The silence was deafening, and Emily felt it like a weight pressing on her chest. She moved forward, each step slow and deliberate, her breath shallow. A cold wind rushed past her and she shivered, but it wasn't just the temperature, it was the palpable presence of something watching her. As she reached the end of the hallway, the lights flickered and went out, plunging her into total darkness. "I know you're here," she called out, her voice trembling but firm. "Show yourself." The silence stretched on, but Emily felt the air shift, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. She wasn't alone anymore. A low guttural growl broke the silence, and Emily's blood ran cold. She spun around, but there was nothing there, nothing except the feeling that something was closing in on her. Her heart pounded in her chest as the growl grew louder, and the floor beneath her feet creaked, shifting as if something massive was moving beneath. "You can't hide from me forever," Emily muttered, her voice filled with resolve. "I'm done running." She turned to face the darkness once more, ready for whatever would come. The growls stopped, replaced by an eerie mocking silence, but Emily didn't flinch. She was done being afraid. She would face the source of her terror, no matter the cost. Suddenly, a shape materialized before her, dark, towering, and suffocating in its presence. The air turned icy, and Emily felt a coldness that cut to her bones. "You have no idea what you've unleashed," the figure hissed, its voice low and distorted. Emily swallowed hard, but she stood her ground. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," she said, her voice stronger now, filled with defiance. The figure's form flickered, as if it couldn't decide whether it was solid or just a shadow. It advanced toward her, but Emily refused to move. She had come too far to be intimidated now. "It's over," she whispered, and for the first time in years she believed it. The figure's form began to distort, its body twisting and warping like a nightmare taking shape. Emily stepped forward, refusing to back down. "You're not real," she said firmly, her voice unwavering. "You're just a memory, a manifestation of my fear." The figure let out a chilling laugh, the sound reverberating through the walls. "You can't escape yourself," it taunted, its voice now full of anger. But Emily wasn't listening anymore. With a surge of adrenaline, she took one final step, reaching out to confront the figure. "This ends now," she whispered, and the air around her seemed to shift, vibrating with the weight of her words. Emily stood at the edge of the dark room, the weight of the past heavy on her shoulders. The figure, now fading, stared at her with those unblinking eyes, but it no longer held the same power over her. "I've faced you," she whispered, her voice strong. "And now, I let you go." The ghost flickered in and out of existence, its form dissipating with each passing second. Emily's heart was still racing, but the terror had begun to subside. She had done what she needed to do. She had confronted the truth. The darkness that had once consumed her was now fading, and with it, the chains that had bound her heart for so long. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the room lift as the silence returned, and with it, a sense of peace she had not known in years. As the last remnants of the ghost disappeared, Emily felt a strange stillness settle over her. The room, once filled with dread, now seemed almost comforting. "It's over," she whispered to herself, the words feeling foreign yet freeing. The memories of fear and regret that had haunted her began to fade, replaced by a quiet acceptance. She wasn't sure what the future would hold, but she knew one thing for sure: she had survived. The horrors of the past had not broken her. They had only made her stronger, and now she could move on, free of the chains that had once held her captive. Emily took a tentative step forward, feeling the weight of her past lighten with each movement. She looked around the room, once a place of terror, now transformed into a quiet sanctuary. "I'm free," she whispered, the words tasting like a long-awaited truth. The house no longer felt like a prison, and the shadows no longer whispered her name. As she walked toward the door, Emily paused. She turned to look at the room one last time, the place where her darkest memories had unfolded. "Goodbye," she said, and with that she stepped out into the light of a new day. As Emily stepped outside, the cool air hit her face, and for the first time in years, she felt truly alive. The weight that had burdened her heart was gone, replaced by an unexpected sense of freedom. The past was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She looked up at the sky, the clouds parting to reveal the sun breaking through. "I can start over," she whispered, her voice full of newfound hope. Emily knew there would be challenges ahead, but she no longer feared them. She had faced her darkest moments, and now she was ready to live again. As Emily walked away from the house, she felt the ghosts of her past slowly fade, leaving behind only memories, no longer filled with fear. She was free, and she knew that this was just the beginning. There was no more running, no more hiding. The shadows no longer held power over her, and in their place was a new strength. Emily had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever came next. "I am free," she said, the words now ringing true as the sun dipped below the horizon, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another.